Jennifer Jones, and I'm thankful to her for giving up her time to tell us her story in her inimitable way. And take this in, folks. This will be riveting. Jennifer, over to you.
Herbert, thank you so much. I think we need to go on the road together. You're very kind in your introductory capacity. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone on the call. It's a delight to be with you, and even more so a delight to be able to look on the screen and recognize friends from different parts of the world that I've had an opportunity to already meet and now reconnect with, and some new friends, obviously, by the end of this call that will have a special bond as well. So today I wanted to be able to share with you sort of where we're at in Rotary at this moment in time, and to be able to, of course, take your questions. And so for the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you some of what I think are the most exciting things that are going on in the Rotary world. And then we'll turn it over to the second half of the program and open up the floor to anything that you would like to ask about. I'm certainly willing and prepared to answer any kinds of questions that you have about anything large or small regarding our great organization. So first and foremost, let me say thank you to each and every one of you for being a leader in our organization. And I mean that sincerely. Everyone in our organization is a leader in some capacity in our community, in our country, in our own organization. And so it's truly a pleasure to be with you. So we're in historic and unprecedented times in our organization's history. You know, we finished in last April a Council on Legislation, our governing body of Rotary, which happens every 3 years. And we had some groundbreaking changes that came to the forefront. First and foremost, and I think probably the most important, is the unprecedented flexibility that clubs now have to do business in a different kind of way, the way that works best for them. And this doesn't necessarily apply to you as an e-club, but one of the big changes that came across is that e-clubs are now considered regular Rotary clubs. And isn't that good news? Because we certainly can understand that meeting virtually is just as important as meeting face-to-face. And that really speaks to something that we're talking about right now. And that's not about necessarily being a Rotarian, but understanding the Rotary experience. Because you're having a wonderful Rotary experience, but you don't have to be within 4 specific walls in another group, in a room with another group of people to do good in the world. And so you are proof positive of that tonight. And this is my second opportunity to sit in on an e-club meeting. And I know it won't be my last. This is a great way to connect with people in all different time zones, countries, cultures, and be one. And that punctuates more than anything the power of Rotary. So as I was mentioning, so we've got this unprecedented time and this flexibility to do Rotary the way that we want it. We've relaxed our attendance requirements to now you have to attend 2 meetings in a month. But what's more important than the actual attendance requirement is the kind of things that we can count as attendance. And so, for example, if you were to do a community service project, would that count as a meeting? Absolutely. How about a committee meeting that you sit in on during the course of a month? Would that count? Absolutely. We have to recognize that we're busy people, and that an eclectic array of how we do service is very, very valuable. And this is important information for clubs to understand because, you know, we don't need secretaries and treasurers who are saying, you've missed a week, John, or 3 weeks, we can no longer have you in the club. And that's not the kind of Rotary that we are anymore. So that's one of the big things that changed in this council, giving us the freedom to do Rotary the way that it best suits us, and with guidelines. And one of the things that's most notable about that is that just because we've been given ultimate flexibility, it doesn't mean that we get rid of the things that are most significant and most important to us. Our core values, our motto of service above self, the object of Rotary. These things are fundamental to who we are. Those things don't change. They don't go out of style or out of fashion. And so we remain committed to high ethical standards and to being the kind of civic leaders who do the right thing when no one's looking. And so, we're changing, but it's with guardrails. And I think that that's a significant thing. And one of the things that I think is kind of cool out of all of this is that really what we've done and what this council did was catch up with what the Rotary world is already doing. A lot of clubs have already said, you know what, we want to do business differently. We want to do it in a way that is more meaningful to us. My husband's club's a prime example. They had a dwindling membership and took a good look at themselves to see, are we attractive? Are we attractive to someone who wants to join us? Are we selling what people want to buy? And they realized that they weren't. And so they changed to a meeting structure where they have 4 different kinds of meetings in a month. One, they have a regular club meeting with a speaker. One, they have a social. 1 week, they have a club assembly to discuss their upcoming projects and programs. And then 1 week, they have a service project. So which of those 4 meetings do you think have the best attendance? The social and the service project. No surprise. And you know what? It's interesting because we've done an abundance of research to, in particular, study our brand and to see, how we can be as relevant as possible in our second century of service. And one of the things that came out of that was some research that we did to say, why do people join Rotary? And then why do they stay? And if you were to look at the reasons, and there's many, but the 2 top reasons why people join Rotary is first for service and second for fellowship or friendship. And then if you ask the same question, why do people stay? It just inverts a little bit. But friendship and fellowship becomes just a smidge more important, and then service follows directly behind. So we know these are the things that fill our hearts, our souls, and it's why we're members of a Rotary Club, to do things that are good in our own community and our global community, however that means something to you. So we did all of this research over the course of a couple of years, and many of you will recognize that we have our new Rotary brand. One of the things that came out of that was most significant, and I wish I had a sample of it, you'll all recognize what I'm speaking of, is we took the Rotary logo and we pulled out our first name out of Rotary International and placed it next to the wheel. So now when you see our logo, it's what we call our Rotary signature. You see the word Rotary, and then you see the wheel with it. The reason for doing that was that when we tested globally, the recognition of our wheel, we weren't getting full credit for what we do and full recognition for who we are as an organization. So pulling our first name out and putting it in there next to the wheel, now when people see the Rotary wheel, there's no surprise about who we are or what we are as an organization. They can see that wheel is indeed Rotary. And I liken it to an example, current example in sort of pop culture, and that's the icon of Starbucks. And if you think about the Starbucks icon, forever it said Starbucks, and then it had that image of a sort of a woman next to it. Well, recently they've gone through pulling their name away, and the icon stands on its own because they've built a strong brand, one that's recognized globally. And when people see that iconic woman, they know exactly what the promise is. They know exactly what's being delivered. And so at one point in time in our future history, I hope that we're able to take our name back off of that. But in the meantime, we need to build that strong recognition for who we are as an organization. So as part of this research, we also had 3 key findings that I think are absolute game changers for our organization. The very first is that we are leaders, every one of us, by mindset, by the way that we think. And this is really important. It's by the way we think, not necessarily by title. Now, why is that important? it's important because if we're going to attract younger members into our organization, are they the CEOs and the captains of industry in their own environments at any given time? No, they're not. They're not yet. But are they leaders? Absolutely. And do we want young leaders in our organization? Absolutely. But more important than that, and this is what I feel to the core of my being, we want young thinkers that are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. It's about the way we think. That's who we are as leaders in this organization. And I like to think that we're young, contemporary, cool, and relevant thinkers. That's what I like to think of us as. The second of our key findings is that we're all about connections, connectivity. And it is that connectivity that makes us special. It's the enduring connections that we make with each other, the relationships that we form with each other. That, you look at, for example, as I mentioned, looking at the screen, I see faces of people who I've spent time with, many, many days and hours of time. Herbert, certainly mentioned the time that we spent in Evanston together. My good friend Lena from Norway is on the call with us, and we've spent countless days together. Tony, we've been training leaders together. It's these kind of connections that all of a sudden, Amanda, we just spent last weekend together. We're so fortunate in this organization that, our community is not just our own space around us. Rotary provides a global community. A couple of weeks ago, I was at another training conference in Stockholm, and Lena, who I mentioned, who was on the call, was there, and we had a chance to hang out for a couple of days. And while we were there was a young Rotaractor, about 29 years old, great gal. Her and another young man were there, and they were participating in the entire event and adding a lot of really good energy and working with some of the youth that were in attendance. The young woman, her name was Sis, and she's from Stockholm. And on the final morning that everyone was presenting and giving some concluding remarks, she was asked, why Rotary? Why Rotary for her? And she said, if you want to join a big organization, join Facebook. If you want to join a quality organization, you join Rotary. I think that that's really cool. And she hit the nail on the head. I believe that that's who we are. We are the original social network, and we are a quality network of individuals of all cultures, occupations, and cultures. And that's what differentiates us from other organizations. It's what makes us different. It's what makes us special. The final of the three key findings is that we are community service scaled globally. Now, I think this is another big game changer because, many times I've run into people who have laid claim in their club. We're a club who is very much focused on our community, and that's what we do. And then I run into another club who says, we're really focused on international service, and this is where we hang our hat, and this is what we do. Both are right. But the reality is, Rotary, as I mentioned earlier, is a community. We just have the ability to scale globally. So Rotary is our community. It's not about whether we do international or local work. It's that we have that ability through the power of one to dream, to come up with an idea, and then take it and launch it and reach out on a call such as this tonight and say, I have this idea. What do you all think? Can we do something about it? Can we make a change? And then we have the ability, because we're leaders, to take action. And that's the final point that I want to share with you, is that out of all of the research that we did, we concluded by creating what we call our essence statement, or our brand promise. And these are 6 key words that are fundamental to how we move the organization forward. And those words you'll likely recognize. And it's that we join leaders, we exchange ideas, and we take action. Now, this is how we now differentiate ourselves. We join leaders. We bring together leaders from, as I said, all cultures, occupations, and cultures. And what do you do when you bring leaders together? you exchange ideas. You talk about things. You talk about how you can make things different. And because we are smart people, then we're compelled to take action. That's pretty cool. And you know what? That becomes a bit of what we call our elevator speech, if you will. When someone asks you, what is Rotary? The inevitable question that we get, and I'll talk about in just a moment. That is a way to frame our organization. Not that you just need to tell them 6 words, but you could do it from the perspective perhaps of Rotary is an organization that joins leaders together, and we get together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to talk about some of the most pressing challenges in our community. For my club, we actually like to work on creating food baskets for the needy in our community. And you know what? We get together on a Saturday and we take action by creating these and getting them out into the community. So you could personalize this to whatever is meaningful for your experience in Rotary. But if we start all singing off of the same song sheet, so that there's a united message that we all send, our brand will become stronger. And people will have us top of mind every time the word Rotary is spoken out loud. So what are we doing about it next? Well, the next step that we're working on within the highest levels of our organization is a new strategic planning committee that's looking at what comes next. What is our next? We have our current strategic plan that focuses on foundation and membership and public image. And this has been critical to how we've taken the organization forward over the past probably decade or so. But like all of us in our own businesses, you need to take a look at your strategic plan from time to time and realize, is it the right model? Is it up to date? Is it current? And the reality is we are living, as I started in the very beginning by saying, in unprecedented times. We are on the brink, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, of eradicating the disease of polio off the face of the earth. Every single one of us has had an opportunity to play a role in that, howbeit either big or small. And as many of you will know, when we started this journey, more than 30 years ago, there were 350,000 cases per year of polio in the world. Today, 34. We have never been closer to the finish line, and we truly are going to cross the finish line. And Rotarians, you might not know these numbers, but they're huge. Rotarians have raised over $1.6 billion for polio eradication and immunized 2.5 billion children for this disease. We have worked tirelessly with our partners, and it's taken a little bit longer than it was thought to take. But you know what? One of the things that we also know about Rotarians is that we persevere and we have tenacity, and we will not walk away without this getting done, and we will keep our promise to the children of the world to ensure that this disease is gone forever. There are many people working tirelessly on this, and I'm sure that some of you have had an opportunity to perhaps participate in an NID, a National Immunization Day, or even have had a chance to just simply raise pennies for polio or different kinds of fundraisers. I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to participate in a very interesting and creative polio fundraiser called Miles to End Polio. And this is a race that goes on in Tucson, Arizona, and it's called the El Tour de Tucson. And Rotary has had a team for about the past 5 years now, really spearheaded by our General Secretary, John Huco. And he's a very avid cyclist and is incredibly, incredibly talented in this capacity. I, on the other hand, love to cycle, but perhaps shorter distances than he likes to cycle. The full race was 106 miles, and I will confess, now there was a 106, that was the full race, and then there was a 75 mile, a 55 mile, and a 28 mile. And with very little time to train, meaning twice, I decided to do the 28 mile leg. However, I took the opportunity to reach out to the Rotarians in the areas that I represent. Even though I'm in Canada, I geographically oversee essentially the upper third of the United States from a governance perspective as a board member. And so I reached out and I challenged them to come up with funds to support me in this ride. And they came up with $468,000 US dollars. Now you think of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation match, and that's just shy of $1.4 million. I'll tell you, this ride started midday in Tucson in the heat of the day. You can imagine, it's very warm. It was, that leg was uphill and into the wind. Even when it was downhill, it felt uphill. And it was hard. It was really hard. And every single time that I wanted to give up and throw in the towel, I just kept thinking of all of these folks who worked tirelessly to raise these funds. And I also kept thinking that I actually get to ride a bike so that someone can walk. How cool is that? And so I was the last of the Rotarian team members, not the last of the 9,000. There were several hundred that came in behind me. The last of our Rotary team, but we had a great time. And I'm sure that many of you have seen some of the cycling pictures if you've seen them in some of the magazines and online. But it was a great opportunity to play a role in what this disease is, what's happening with this disease, and that it is truly going to be gone in some short given time. But I brought that up because, where we're at right now is we have to think of what's our world look like, what's our Rotary world look like in a post-polio world. And, we will not stray 1 second from saying that our largest corporate initiative is the eradication of polio. But if we don't start having a dialogue now, not about what is next, but how do we even have the conversation? What are the things that we need to be talking about? Do we need to be talking with our partners, with Rotarians? What's happening with our areas of focus, and where are Rotarians putting their time and their energy and their money? What are the things that we need to measure in order to take a next step? And I don't have an answer for you because, quite candidly, there isn't one. And so we have a newly comprised strategic planning committee that is looking at some of these things and looking at where do we go next as an organization, not necessarily from a corporate project priority, but where do we go next just fundamentally? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about to remain as relevant as we can as we go into, as I said, our second century of service. So I'm a storyteller, and I love to tell stories. I think it's one of the ways that we connect best with people about our organization. And, every one of us has a Rotary story to tell. And when we tell those stories, people understand and they see into what it is that we do. And I think it helps us to connect. So I want to, before starting and opening up to questions, I just want to finish with a favorite story that I like to tell. And it's one about a time while I was serving as district governor in 2007, 2008. And I live in Canada, but I'm in an international district. And so our district at that point in time had 50 clubs on the US side. And then the Detroit River splits between Detroit and Windsor, where I live. And then we had 12 clubs on the Canadian side. So as a governor living in Canada, I had to travel across to the United States hundreds of times in the course of a year to go and visit my clubs and participate with them in their fundraisers and their programs and their social activities and my official visits, etc. And so it was one day that I pulled up to the customs booth, and there was an officer there who was not having a good day. And he had a very stern look on his face, and he had his arms crossed, and he barked at me and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to a Rotary meeting." And he said, "Rotary? What's Rotary?" And so I was perhaps a little cheeky when I asked him if he wanted to hear the long version or the short version. And he said, "Just tell me what it is." And so I told him. I told him about the fact that we were 1.2 million men and women united under the motto of service above self, doing good work in our own community and beyond. And he looked at me and he said, he barked again, "What do you really do?" And so I told him about my own club and our local fundraisers and our projects and programs and our passions. And he started to lean in a little more. And he said, "What else do you do?" So I told him about clean water and health and hunger and literacy. And then I told him about polio. "Polio? Polio's gone," he said. And he continued to lean in more. And I said, "Yes, sir, polio is gone from many parts of the world, but it remains endemic. At that point, 4 countries. Now we know 3. And Rotarians are working tirelessly to eradicate this disease off the face of the planet." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do about AIDS?" And I said, "Sir, there's many Rotarians who are working on projects for AIDS and tuberculosis and malaria and so much more." And then he paused and he said, "You mean to tell me there are that many people in the world with that much extra time on their hands?" I said, "No, sir. There are that many people in the world with no time on their hands that are committed to doing the good work of Rotary." And then he said, with tears forming in his eyes, "You have made my day." And I said, "No, sir. It's you that has made mine." And then he said, "Please thank the people. Please thank the people." And so I carry his message here to you today to say thank you. Thank you for all that you are doing. Thank you for all that you are going to do. And thank you for being leaders in our organization, for gathering at a meeting like this today and being able to share fellowship with me. This has been a true honor and a true privilege. And I'd love to open the floor to any questions that you have. And as I said, there's nothing's off the table. So by all means, fire away.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Can I just say on a housekeeping note, we use the electronic raise your hand at our meetings. So depending on which device you're using will depend on exactly where you can raise your hand. So can I ask you to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and we'll call you to ask. If there's anybody that doesn't know how to raise their hand electronically, let us know and we will try. Amanda?
Thanks, Helen. Jennifer, thanks very much indeed. Great to hear you speak with us once again. As Herbert said, it's always a pleasure to listen. You've got some great experience that you bring to share with us. I know you said that there really wasn't an answer in regard to what might happen next for Rotary, but I want to be really, I suppose, a bit personal. What's your own view as a Rotarian? Where do you think we might be best served, either by looking at perhaps a single big cause, no doubt, or maybe looking at our 6 areas of focus and finding something for each one of those? What's your view on that?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that I actually ask audiences regularly right now when I'm out in the field. And the interesting thing is that the answer, typically I say, how many of you are interested in another corporate project? How many of you are interested in something that is a special project in each of the areas of focus? And inevitably, it's usually about 50-50 in the room. It's not, there's no clear-cut answer that Rotarians are telling us in terms of, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. And so that's really part of, what we're discussing right now is how do we even frame, how do we get to an answer? It's not an easy thing. One of the things that I do think that we need to look at, though, are the lessons learned from our experience in polio. Polio, from my personal perspective, took us from our fledgling teens into our adulthood as an organization. It really galvanized us behind a cause, and it united us to do something together. Now, one of the hallmarks of our organization is that we're grassroots. Things bubble up from the bottom to the top. Polio started that way, but it did become a corporate program. And so, while it still has a lot of grassroots elements to it, it also does have a corporate side to it as well, which is, obviously a little top down. So But you know, it's also it's helped us create vital partnerships with our partners, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, the WHO, the Centers for Disease Control. You know, these are important relationships that we have with them, and those are people that we're going to need to be speaking to, because we need to know what they're going to do next as well. And you know, are we going to collaborate on another project together? Are we, you know, as you mentioned, are we looking at perhaps a special project that reflects each of our areas of focus, something that is specifically water and has a special way that Rotarians can embrace that, something for peace centers that Rotarians can embrace that. I will tell you that, you know, as you start to look at the landscape of our areas of focus, there are areas that Rotarians gravitate toward a little more than some of the others. Our peace centers, literacy, water, those are things that resonate very powerfully. And that's not to diminish the value of the other areas of focus, but you know, I think probably at the end of the day, in direct answer to your question, I think that whatever we do is going to be hanging on the notion of peace. And that's what we do, whether it's building wells, whether it's reading to children, whether it's teaching someone to read, you know, whether it's helping a midwife learn her craft better through training. I mean, there's all different kinds of ways that we make an impact, but every single one of those helps to create a more peaceful world. And so I think that's probably the most direct answer. But
thank you.
That's
great.
Opinion, and I don't have any legitimate insight into what's next, except know that we're talking about it.
Ian, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for your inspirational talk there. I was taking plenty of notes. My question is that in District 1020, which is south and central Scotland, south and east Scotland, we have taken the view that we want to use the tool of Rotary Club Central. But when we visit clubs and we have area meetings, many of the clubs will say they're far too busy to start recording events and successes and so on. What advice would you give me as an assistant governor to try and convince them to use Rotary Club Central?
Excellent question, Ian. Thank you. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, and I know we've got people from all different continents on the call, but my heritage is actually from Scotland and from Wales. So at some point, and I'm embarrassed to say that I've not visited either country. So we'll have to correct this at some point, sometime very soon. So in answer to your question, Rotary Club Central is something is an excellent tool, but you know what? We haven't realized its full potential yet. And part of that is that we've had antiquated technology and IT support for this tool and for Rotary.org, to be quite candid. And so we're in the middle right now of doing some very, very serious updates to Rotary.org and to Rotary Club Central to enhance the experience for Rotarians. Many of you will maybe be familiar with the fact over this past weekend, Rotary.org was down, as was Rotary Club Central, as we made some platform changes. We've been working with multiple different kinds of platforms, things that weren't talking with each other, open rates. When you're trying to get onto Rotary Club Central that we're taking, 11, 15, 20 seconds, nobody wants to wait around that long for that kind of experience with Rotary. And so we're taking, this is our number one priority internally right now, is getting this right. And so within the next couple of weeks and months, you will see dramatic changes to both the website and to Rotary Club Central. Now, to answer your question of why it's important and what you can tell your club members, one of the things that happens through putting and cataloging some of this information, particularly putting in the kind of things like the funds that clubs raise, or the amount of hours of service time perhaps that they do. Let's just think of those two categories in itself. If you were to talk about Rotary as an entity right now, we could say without any hesitation, we're $120 million foundation we collect that much in our foundation every year and churn that back out into the world to do good work. But you know what? We're not counting what every single club does. So if we started to quantify the amount of funds raised and the hours of volunteer time which have an economic value to them, you know what? We're not a $120 million foundation anymore. We're a $3, $4, $5 billion economic engine every single year. And so part of this tool is really to help us to try and start to quantify that and get that information, because, you know, at that point, we're not the little cousin to Bill Gates at that point. We stand shoulder to shoulder as equals in what we bring to the table, and we bring muscle and we bring resources like nobody's business. And so this is the primary reason, Ian, that we're really trying to gather a lot of this information, aside from, you know, understanding how to create an archive online for clubs to be able to look at. I mean, it's a really valuable resource when you're an incoming president or a president nominee to be looking at, you know, what's gone on in the past couple of years. And let's be really candid, not everyone's good at taking and keeping paper records. So, you know, we're really hoping that this is going to be a tool that's very useful for clubs as they go forward from a continuity standpoint into the future.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're very welcome.
Joy, I think you're next.
Thank you. I was quite interested a few months ago, Jennifer, when you were out with Rolling Rotary across the US. I mean, obviously, we've got to really concentrate on some of these younger people. One of the things, I mean, we've got Interact, Rotaractors, but in America, not so much Rota Kids. What's going to be the future there as far as Rota Kids are concerned?
Well, that's an interesting question, and one that, quite candidly, Joy, I don't have a lot of knowledge base. I think that might be something that's a little stronger, perhaps in the UK or in Scotland. I've heard of Rota Kids, but I don't have a lot of experience with it. I do think that, you know, we're spending a lot of time right now looking at our youth programs, and you mentioned several of them, and let's add Ryla into the mix as well. One of the things that, and I'm taking a bit of a leap out here, but one of the things I think that we should be doing is actually counting them in our numbers. And, you know, they are part of our Rotary family. And, you know, we're not 1.2 million, we're many more than that. And, you know, Rotaractors, let's say, for example, we only convert 5% of Rotaractors ever into being Rotarians. That's absolutely an astonishing fact, and one that I think is appalling. Here's our farm team, the people who believe in us, that we are training, that we're mentoring, that we're learning from, and only 5% of them are joining. And so I would like to see us bring them closer to us so that they feel that they're much more part of our own family. And in this recent Council on Legislation, one of the things that was passed is that Rotaractors now can be Rotarians simultaneously, and that's a nice step in the right direction. But with regard to Rota Kids in particular, I'm sorry, I can't speak with that with much knowledge, and if you want to give me a little bit more, I can try.
Okay, thanks. Tony? Tony? Tony, you want to ask a question?
So we need to be clear that it's Tony Quinn that's got his hand up to ask a question. Tony's changed his mind. Then Robert from South Africa wanted to ask a question.
I wanted to follow up on Ian's comment with regard to Rotary Club Central. One of the areas that was being looked at in South Africa was the use of Club Runner. And I'm only a new Rotarian, so if I say anything that's politically incorrect, I do apologize. There seemed to be a challenge in as much, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay. It seemed to be a bit of a concern with the fact that Club Runner is a project, a work in progress project, and that the information in it doesn't quite reflect what's on the, I think it must be Rotary.org. And there seems to be a general belief that the focus should be toward Rotary Club Central as far as Club Runner. Do you perhaps have any comment about Club Runner? Is it going to carry on, not carry on, or what?
I don't know about its, thank you for your question, Robert. I don't know about its future by any stretch. I do know that it's a very widely used system. Here in North America, there's also another one called DAC-DB, both of them feeding into Rotary Club Central. And I guess probably the thing that I can say to you on this is that the most important thing is that we're trying to get accurate profile data on members. And so it really does require people, whether it's through Club Runner, whether it's through Rotary Club Central, going in and maintaining and updating data in real time and making sure that that happens. So I don't know of, I haven't heard of anything negative about where they're going. I believe they're in fine shape, but it really is more about the data collection aspect of it. That's probably not very, very helpful.
No, that's fine, Jennifer. Thank you very much indeed. So you said the other one is called DAC-DB. Is that DAC-DB, or how do you spell DAC-DB?
DAC-DB. And I believe it's an acronym for something. I don't know what it stands for, probably data something or other. But yeah, if you Google that, you can.
It must bring it up. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Robert.
Lucas?
First of all, yes, we can. Now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for very much talk. I learned a lot today, and I was really wondering, in the Rotary family, how can every club continue working on the future of Rotary today and the biggest challenges you're currently facing when it comes to evolving what Rotary is?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time understanding the question. It broke up a little bit, Lucas, sorry.
It's a question, how can everyone contribute to Rotary becoming and what Rotary isn't becoming? Do you see the big challenges we are currently facing as an organization?
All right, let me see if I got this right. How, and I'm going to paraphrase, how can younger people and youth be more engaged with Rotary considering the challenges we have?
Yes, that's the thing, is how we're going to evolve as an organization. I'll just tap out for a second.
Lucas, if you type your question, we'll ask it for you. Breaking up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, if you want to type that down, and then we can tackle it, because it's really hard to understand the nuance because it's breaking up.
While Lucas is typing his question, Tony Quinn also had sound problems, and his question was, given the amount of investment in the application and the importance of it to tell our story and to measure performance, do you think it will ever become mandatory?
Rotary Club Central?
I assume that's what he's talking about, yes.
Well, you know, I mean, certainly as directors, we're working tirelessly on trying to, in each of our own geographical areas, work with our teams and get the message down as best we can to the clubs to share with them the importance of doing it. It has not been a mandatory requirement to date. However, as many of you will recognize, in what we call our presidential citation, what Rotary clubs strive to fill out to be recognized for doing a number of different things in the course of a year, and being celebrated for that, being part of Rotary Club Central and putting in this year at least 10 goals on Rotary Club Central is what is the barometer for the presidential citation. So it's not a mandatory thing, but certainly from the explanation that I gave earlier, you can understand the impact if we can capture a more fulsome look at the Rotary world through this tool, and there's not many other ways to do it, then it's not mandatory, but gosh, it sure would be good if everybody could be on board.
James, you want to unmute yourself? James Martin, yeah.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. I guess it's you're kind of raised as the great hope for Rotary as we move forward, not to put any pressure on you at all. But as we do move forward, as a 44-year-old male Rotarian who is increasingly disengaging with the organisation because of its failure to pick up on equality, diversity issues across the world, how do you convince me to stay beyond July next year in the organisation when I would struggle to recommend the organisation to a female colleague at work, or a Asian colleague at work, or a gay colleague at work?
James, you're speaking my language. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we need to do a better job on showcasing diversity in our organization on all levels, and you mentioned many of them. I'm 49, and only in 49 sitting on the board can you be considered a kid. And we need to recognize that we need to bring in, I said it at the top, we need to bring in younger people into our organization clearly. And that's of all different walks of life and different kinds of cultures and sexual orientation, etc. But I think, one of the things I'm trying to frame is this whole notion of young thinkers, because we don't want to dismiss that, have you ever met a 20-year-old this old?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have, but have you met a 80-year-old who's really young? Absolutely. And so we don't want to diminish or discount the contributions that all of us have, but we have been spending a lot of time in North America. There was a grant that was enabled to us to do some young professional research and getting into the field to talk about, what is it that that is a trigger for young people that wants to make young people stay. And this was because there was a Rotarian who in the US gave a $1 million gift and said, I want you to figure this out, and this is what this money is specifically for. So one of the things that I think is important that comes out of, I've been doing countless focus groups with every district I go to, I do a focus group with a group of young professionals such as yourself. And talk about, okay, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And, the reality is that, our biggest competition is not anything other than life. We have busy lives, and, we need to recognize that our life and our family and our work does come first, and our volunteer lives come second. It's got to be something that is a supplement to our lives that makes us feel good about, being human. But we need to identify, and this is where, directly answering your question, what's our value proposition? And what are we offering to people to be part of this organization? So when I talk about being leaders, you know what? That's about mentoring. Where else can you go and sit next to somebody at a meeting who you might need to pay $250 an hour or $300 an hour to get their counsel in any other kind of capacity, and they become your friend? But that's mentorship up and down the line. I mean, there's, people in their their later years of life who need mentoring from young people, let's say even with social technology. But it's about developing your leadership skills. I know that I am a better public speaker. I'm better with finances. I'm a better event planner. There's all different kinds of ways, and I say that from a personal perspective, that I have grown because of being part of Rotary. And what we need to ensure is that our meetings, physical meetings, and meetings like this as well, that they're attractive to people, that we're talking about things that are important, and that we're not talking about the way it always was because that's just the way it always was. And being fresh in our thinking is really, really important. And so, one of the things, there's a great speaker that I love out of Australia named Michael McQueen. And he says, sometimes it's easier to give birth than raise the dead. And what that means specifically to a Rotary Club is that some Rotary Clubs probably need to go away. And some of them, if they're not willing to be flexible and they're not looking at new ways of doing Rotary, they're not going to be attractive to people, and people are not going to want to join their clubs. And eventually they will go on to higher service, and that is just inevitability. So what do? We need to make the experience something rewarding and rich for people who come in, so that they say, this values my time, and it's something that I want to do, and I don't want to just be spoken to. I want to be part of something. We want our hands in service. We want to get our hands into things, and so we need to give people those opportunities. And so I hope that some of that resonates with you, because I truly, as do you, believe that our best days are ahead, and there are Rotary clubs that I would not invite people to as well.
Thank you.
I'm conscious of the time. We are scheduled to be closing shortly, but we do have lots of people asking questions. So if you don't mind, and you can bear with us.
I'm good for as long as you guys want to talk. I'm good.
I'm going to read out Lucas's question. Thank you, Jennifer. And then Richard Bosworth will be next after I've read Lucas's question. So the one that we couldn't hear, unfortunately, Lucas, was, with all the change in Rotary, both in terms of organisation and projects, where do the biggest challenges, and how can each club contribute to becoming a Rotary of tomorrow?
Helen, this is ridiculous, but you broke up as well.
I'll try again.
One more time.
With all the change in Rotary, both in terms of organisation and projects, where I think there's words missing. I think it's maybe lost in translation. So I think what he's asking is, where do you think the biggest challenge is, and how can each club contribute to becoming a Rotary of tomorrow?
Okay. Thank you. And Lucas, we finally get to talk. Biggest challenge by far is membership. That absolutely is our number one operational focus, or organizational focus, or operational focus, I guess is what I should say. We have to be cognizant about where our numbers are going, and that's not because we're playing a numbers game. We got to eliminate that kind of thinking altogether, and go back to what I was just talking to James about creating the right experience for Rotarians so that they want to be part of our organization. And so that is our number one most pressing challenge by far. And what I didn't speak to, James, and this speaks to what you're talking about, Lucas, as well, is that we need to ensure that we are attractive to a wide-ranging audience, and that we're welcoming. If you're in a club situation where you don't have, let's say, women, for example, trying to bring a woman into a club that doesn't look like it's friendly to women isn't necessarily going to be an experience that's going to keep that person there. So one of the tactics that happens frequently is looking at, okay, well, let's not bring in one, let's bring in 3 or 4 at the same time, so that they actually have, they can see themselves in the club and how they fit in, and that there's a few people who are ushered in together in a similar kind of experience. So that's one kind of tactic. So other things that we need to be thinking about, well, some of them I've addressed earlier in terms of, you know, how we have looked at our Rotary brand. And I'm excited to share with you that at the International Assembly, which is in January, a big meeting in January, we'll be launching a new set of public relations, public image tools, commercials, television, radio, billboards, and it's going to be, I've been on the ground floor of this one, and it's really cool. We've been working with a firm, YNR. It's a global-based marketing firm. They've done tons of research to understand what's going to resonate with people around the world. And I think, you know, those are things that we need to be getting out through social media, through the way that we connect. I know when I put out some of the new tools that we have, new videos, different things like this out on social media, they get a lot of traction, not just from Rotarians, even though most of my Facebook friends are Rotarians, but a lot of non-Rotarians too, and they're starting to see it. And I think that, you know, the more that we put out that a youthful image, regardless of age, that we are hip, that we are cool, that we are relevant, and that we speak that and we support that and we live that, you know, positive breeds positive. And I really believe that, you know, as I said earlier, our best days are to come, and championing that youthful spirit is something that I think is really important. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but it's a couple of the major things, and membership being the number one key priority.
Richard, you want?
Thank you very much indeed. Jennifer, thank you very much indeed for a very interesting tour de force in the last hour. Mine is as much a question as an observation. You mentioned just now the fact that we need to be more social media savvy. In a webinar we held here in the UK, what came out was that nobody's trained. There is nobody helping us to work a Facebook page or how to Twitter, or even how to link our LinkedIn pages and so forth. So my first question is, what are we going to do about bringing this organization into the 21st century without just assuming that we're all techno savvy? I'm a techno peasant, and I've just joined this format in the last couple of months. And what I've got to say is that when I've talked to young people in Yorkshire, an e-group is what they want. They don't want to go to the Crown Hotel and sit for a dinner and hear a speaker. They'd much rather come and join you this evening because you espouse what it is. So there's two parts about it. What are we going to do about social media training, and what are we going to do about promoting e-clubs? Because they're the things that young people identify with. Well,
both parts. I mentioned earlier about my husband's club and the 4 different kinds of meetings that they have. One of the reasons that they did that is that they've eliminated having a meal from their meetings. So the expense becomes much less. And so, you know, as you're trying to, that just isn't about young people under the age of 30. That's about all of us. We all have, you know, finite resources that, you know, there's clubs that it's $50 to have a meal. That's ridiculous. You know, how do you expect people to maintain that, much less bring younger members into the organization? So the part about, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. The first part about the club meeting and the expense. So I guess doing things differently and understanding that it's different is what's going to work. I mean, there's clubs right now, satellite clubs that are trying things like they meet once a month for a service project, and then they meet some other time during the month for, you know, a social or something like that, and that's working for them. And, you know, when they do their community service project, half of them bring friends and their kids and relatives along with them, because they're all doing something. They all want to do something good. And it's not about, you know, the structure of a meeting per se. So that's, I guess, speaking to the first part. To the second part, I'm looking at the screen, and by show of hands, anyone here as part of the club, as a fellow member, that would maybe be willing to mentor Richard a little bit on social media? Just stick your hand up. Anybody? Lucas? All right, Lucas and Richard and David, the three of you, if you can connect offline, this is what I'm talking about the two-way mentorship. And that it is, you know, Richard, you clearly have an abundance of things to share with someone your junior, and Lucas, you have an abundance of things to share with someone who is your senior, and David as well. So let's see what you guys can pull off together by meeting offline. Sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. And that wasn't a way of skirting the question. That was a way of punctuating mentorship.
Yeah, but yeah, I still come back to the one that it came out, as I say, in a webinar, that social media training.
Oh, yes.
At a district level, at a zone level, we need to help members to be in there.
Well, and you know what? Maybe there is a meeting that you host specifically to go over social media best practices. Maybe that's something that you look at as a future meeting. I agree with you. It is, but I think, you know, social media is so prevalent at this point in time that, you know, you're surrounded with people within your own environment, as we just punctuated, who are going to be able to help you. And so anyone looking for that kind of training needs to rely on each other.
First of all, it's not my problem. Thank you very much for picking up on it. I'm active on social media, but it's when you talk to the average council or board member, they're simply saying, what's this internet thing? And they are looking at Facebook and wondering what's going on. How can we put a modern image when our own people are not geared to it?
That's a tough one to answer.
Oh yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah,
Let me leave you to think about it. You don't have to answer that. It's food for thought.
Yeah, it doesn't really put forward a very engaging, relevant image for our organization, does it? So
yeah, that's it. That's the problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think time just for one more question. Judith, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. Thank you. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Judith.
My e-club has certainly heard about this, about my daughter, she would be a fourth generation Rotarian. She's 30 years old, and she works in global project development at General Motors outside of Detroit. She hunted hard to try to find a Rotary club that would meet her schedule and so on, and could not find one. And so I think she's the demographic that we're looking for. She's young, she's bright, she knows all about social media and all that sort of thing. Would love to join Rotary Club. The Rotary Club of Ferndale, I'm looking at their website right now. There's nothing on it. There's nothing on the calendar. There's nothing on the events. You know, this is not going to attract people. So she ended up joining the Kiwanis Club. And they have a much looser structure in terms of attendance, projects. One of the things that they do is that they do as a service project, they will teach other Kiwanis clubs about social media. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things they do. I don't want to use up all our time about that. Is there a way that I can reach you and just tell you a little bit more about, you know, her and what you can suggest? Because she really wants to be a Rotarian.
Well, absolutely. Let's connect offline, because clearly she's less than a half an hour away from where I am.
Exactly.
And so I can certainly steer her towards some of the more exciting opportunities that she might not have turned up. My email is jjones at media, MEDIA, street, STREET, CA for Canada.
CA for Canada. Right. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yep. Shoot me a note and we'll try and hook her up.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to officially close the meeting just now, and I'd like to ask President-elect Nee to say a few words of thank you. And before he does, just to say we'll stay online. So if you want to chat amongst yourselves or have got any more questions, please do so. But in the meantime, hopefully Nee is going to say a few words. Nee, if you unmute yourself, good lad.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. Well, what can I say? Rotary is indeed good. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please join me in saying a very, very big thank you to Jennifer Jones for her wonderful, informative, and educative presentation. And for yourselves, thank you for your attendance, your attention, and your participation. Thank you very much. And good evening from London.